My name is Lorenzo Sanchez. I'm a candidate running for Texas House District 67. That is in Collin County along the southern edge of Dallas County. So Dallas County is to the southern border of me, running in Plano, Allen, and Richardson. I think the reason why I decided to run was after 2016, I started volunteering a lot of my time to local candidates. So I know right away I started with school board races and city council races, trying to help people get elected. I realized what I had been doing prior to me volunteering for these candidates wasn't enough. Just giving them $20 and making sure that my family goes out to vote wasn't enough. I needed to go and energize my neighborhood and really get them on board to try to flip this seat, but also cause real change here in the Dallas suburbs, which we've seen have been some of the stubborn ones that don't want to flip. We're going to be the last ones to flip our suburbs here in Texas, but hopefully we'll be successful at flipping them and keeping them that way. I don't come from a lot of economic wealth. My background, I was raised by my mother, and she raised me and my sister, born in Chicago, Illinois. She brought us down here to District 67 in Texas because she realized the potential that my sister and I could have by attending, the school districts here, by living somewhere that is really diverse and understanding and open to people of other cultures and to people from different, economic classes as well. So I know when I started off really young, I didn't speak English. That's something I needed to learn in school, and I had my teachers really put in and invest so much time and energy into my education to make sure that I could go and be successful in college and then be successful at starting my own business. So now I just want to go and fight for my community. I think that we have been getting sold short by our politicians here in Collin County. They're not really focusing on issues that are affecting our families here. And that is the kind of legislator I want to be. I want to be the kind of person that finds solutions for everyone in my community. If it's something that's affecting their household, I want to be the person that they can rely on to go and try to help. I'm really passionate about what I'm doing. We built the largest grassroots organization in the history of our county, and this is for a Texas House race because we knew that's what we were going to need in order to really change the trajectory of Collin County. And we knocked on more doors than any other campaign has before us during the primary, since we have not been knocking on doors since COVID. But that's the kind of energy we're building up here in Collin County. Everyone is really excited. This is one of the top 5 most contested seats in order for us to flip the Texas House. This is one that Beto O'Rourke won. So we know the Democrats exist there. The only challenge we have is making sure we get Democrats to vote all the way down the ballot this year, explaining to them what's at stake, and then also making sure that I can get my message out to voters. That's been the most difficult thing right now, since we're the most contested race that had a runoff because we didn't have the 2018 nominee rerun in 2020. We're playing catch up now, trying to make sure that we have the funds necessary to get our message across to voters and be successful in November. So we're always needing volunteers to do phone calls. If you can't give, but if you can give, even if it's a small amount, please do so. You can visit lorenzofortexas.com and donate there or volunteer there. Also the attached links so we can make sure we get a lot of good Democrats elected, because I won't be able to do it alone. I'm going to need the help of a lot of people. I'm just one piece of a way larger puzzle that we need to get accomplished in Texas. And with your help, I know I'll be successful. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. Joanna, how about, can you kick it off?
Sure. Thank you all so much for being with us this evening, and whatever, as Gaby said, apocalyptic weather situation you might be having. My name is Joanna Cattanach. I am the Democratic nominee for the state representative seat in House District 108, which is located in the heart of Dallas County. It is parts of East Dallas, the downtown area, all of the Park cities, and adjacent Preston Hollow and Bluffview. I'm excited to be a second-time candidate. I ran for the same House seat in 2018, and we lost by 220 votes in a recount out of 78,000. It was one of the closest margins in the 2018 cycle. I came back to run again because I think that's important. And one of the people on your call today of the 78, somewhere in that 78 pool is Taylor, who worked with our campaign last time as well. I don't know if you can wave or say hi, but she worked that campaign just as hard as anybody else. And now we are back at it again. This race is now considered the most flippable in Texas, largely because of that ability to run back-to-back, which is crucial and so important, and because we had really competitive primaries and we just kept at it and showed persistence. I mean, really, that is what it's going to take to flip this Texas State House. We are 9 seats away from doing so. Keep in mind, we're in a chamber right now where over 5,000 men have served in office and fewer than 200 women. So what we're doing is not just changing the leadership in the House, it's changing the dynamics of the State House. And I'm a big believer in changing the dynamics in a room, you can change the dynamics in a room. And I'm hoping that that's the kind of energy we're going to be taking forward as we approach 2021. I am from Texas originally. I grew up in a little town called Blum, Texas. My hometown population at last count was 444. So we're really on the upswing there in Blum, Texas. I'm a first generation college graduate and a former foster care child. I had an interesting life experience that few people get to have. Not only was I in foster care, I was adopted out of foster care, got to go to college, got to pursue my dream of being a reporter, and I've been an educator and communications instructor for the last 10 years. When elected, I will be one of only 2 former foster care children to serve in the Texas legislature. And that to me is so important because so much about what you know about the story of Texas, either from an outside perspective or what you read in the news, it's a different experience having been here my whole life and having understood the opportunities that I was given by teachers who believed in me, who helped me, who literally drove me to the college admissions office so that I could apply because I had no idea what I was doing. And that is what has made me so successful. So for me, running again, it was one of the easiest decisions I could make because so many people put their heart and soul into this campaign to push this district from a 20-point Republican advantage to one that we lost by 0.2%. That's how close this was. And it's so important that we keep that energy up again. I'm so excited to be part of the sister district. I'm thankful for all of the phone calls and the daily postcards that are being mailed to my house right now. That's awesome. I appreciate that's happening. My kids run out every day to look what new packages they've gotten from California, and we appreciate that so much. But more than anything, I want to give you the good news that is happening here. Our polling shows that we are up against our opponent. Our polling shows that Joe Biden is leading this district by 23% in a district that Mitt Romney won over Obama. That's how far we have flown. This is a district that Beto O'Rourke won by 15%. We have been persistent and we work hard in 108. I call our team the Orange Army, which is what you sort of see around me, little bits of orange, because we sort of envelop that energy, and that's the exact same kind of energy I want to take to the Texas State House. I look forward to serving with Lorenzo and Celina and a bunch of amazing people. We are ready to go. We know what's at stake. I love what Gaby said. We've been tardy to the party too long, frankly. It's been too long, and we're not tardy anymore. We're ready to show up. They are afraid of losing the chamber right now. They are aggressively campaigning, and in my case, my opponent has taken the word Republican and conservative off of everything and uses blue coloring in all of his messaging right now. He is trying to fool the district to think he's someone he's not, and it's our job to educate the voters here about who we are, about who he is, and about how important 2020 is. So I'm excited to be with you tonight. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to see Lorenzo. I watched the race from afar. I was busy grinding it out in my own county, but I'm glad to see you make it through. It is tough to campaign in the pandemic, but we are some pretty tough people, and we come from some interesting backgrounds, and we are so ready to flip the State House. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Celina, have we got you on the line as well? If so, it'd be great if you could tell us a little about yourself and your district and how the race is going.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gabby, and thank you to everyone for spending their evening with us tonight. You know, this is a race that, like many others, is one that has been sort of been, as you said, tardy to the party, right? This is a district that has long been considered a Republican stronghold. I was the first Democrat to run in 20 years in 2018, and in that time, we were able to show that there is a real desire for a change in leadership here. Beto ran in this district as well and won, in fact, and that's one of the reasons why this race has also become one of those 9 seats we need in order to flip the state house. I was raised here in District 121. My mom raised 7 of us on her own. She cleaned houses to make ends meet. And, you know, for me, that meant that, you know, showing honor and dignity in every form of work, right? And she did that because here in Texas and in like many communities, where you live and where you go to school certainly has an impact on your outcomes for your future and in your success. And so she worked extremely hard to make sure that we could stay in our home and go to the neighborhood school that produced those high outcomes. I was able to graduate from a small school here in San Antonio and go on to study journalism at Northwestern University and be a fellow with the Innocence Project there and start my work with you know, other fellow social justice warriors. I came back to San Antonio after that and worked for Texas Public Radio, and in doing so started to learn a little bit more about my own community and just how right my mom had it. I got to see the disparities in this community play out in every story that I reported on. And we could see that even now, 1 in 4 adults here in San Antonio is considered functionally illiterate. That means that they are not able to fully fill out a job application or read a bank statement in order to, you know, propel themselves forward and you know, be that breakout of cyclical poverty that we're seeing here in San Antonio, one of the most economically segregated communities in the country. So I left my work as a reporter in order to take an opportunity to start a nonprofit that focused specifically on literacy here in Bexar County. And now, almost 10 years later, we're seeing the impacts of that. We're seeing an increase in literacy. We're seeing those generations starting to improve. And we're seeing that siblings of those who started in this program are a part of that change. And that's really what this campaign is about, change. If we're able to flip the house and change what leadership looks like in Texas, we can expand Medicaid. We can protect women's reproductive health. We can fully fund our public schools and support the teachers, especially in a time like this. And in a year like 2020, when we're getting ready for redistricting, we can change partisan gerrymandering and ensure that it's voters who are selecting their representatives and not the other way around. But in order to get there, we're going to need to flip these 9 seats. And we are so close. As Joanna said, we are all so excited for this because we can see it. It is just a few days away. Early voting starts here October 13th, so just a little over a month away. And we have an opportunity, a real opportunity that we haven't seen in our lifetime to change how politics is done in Texas. And when we change how things are done here, it will change the rest of this country. We are poised to get 3 more congressional seats here in the state, and that can certainly change the balance of power in Washington as well. And so I say thank you so much to Sister District for recognizing the importance of state house seats, recognizing the importance of local politics, and for those of us who are working to ensure that we can be a part of that change. And thank you to all of you who are a part of it with us. We certainly could not do it without you. And the reality is we are starting to see some defense mechanisms creep up in our GOP opponents. We are starting to see you know, some messaging come out that is, I would say, a little less than straightforward. But the reality is it's because they're scared. They're afraid that there is really something to lose here. And that's a different position for them to be in. And it's a good position for us. And at least in my case, our polling indicates not only are we ahead, but we have the opportunity to set the entire tone of this race. Our incumbent is not very well known and not very well recognized. And so what that means is that we get to tell the story of this district, and we get to tell the story of how change can make for progress. And so that's exactly what we're doing. And thank you to your help, we have been able to do that in a way that has never been done in this district. And if we're able to flip this seat, it would be the first time in Texas history that we are able to flip a former speaker's seat from Republican to Democrat. And wouldn't that be a blow to the party? So when we are getting ready, because we got to look ahead, when we're getting ready to 2022 and our statewide races, and we're looking towards our governorship, our lieutenant governorship, and the rest of the leadership that really pulls the direction of Texas, we're going to see that there's a real opportunity like we've never seen before. And this is just the beginning. So thank you for being a part of it with us. Thank you for, pitching in and making sure that, the work gets done. We are going 24/7 these days. And so we appreciate y'all allowing us the time and the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Celina. It's just wonderful to hear all three of you talk about your districts and the energy that you're bringing into these races. It's infectious, and I'm so excited to be here with you. With that, I want to turn things over to my fellow co-founder, Lala Wu, for a few words about some upcoming phone banks that we're running and the incredible work that she's doing in the organizing department here at Sister District.
Thank you, Gabby, and thank you to our candidates, Lorenzo, Joanna, and Celina, all for being here. So incredibly inspiring to hear from you all. I mean, Zoom meetings are Zoom meetings, but I can feel the excitement in this one. It is just kind of pouring through the screen. So I'm really incredibly happy to be here. My name is Lala. I'm one of the co-founders of Sister District and the Director of Engagement and Partnerships. I'm really pleased that in addition to Rita Bosworth, our executive director, who's on the line, we also have our head of organizing, Neil Morgan, who's here, as well as Taylor Hoagland, who has roots in Texas, as Joanna mentioned. She has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into these Texas State House races, and we're so pleased that she's able to be here with us to help us do everything we can to take Texas across the finish line as well. So just want to, of course, this is a fundraiser, but want to highlight a few of the items we are doing on field. Taylor just popped them into the chat. We have a phone bank tomorrow for our Texas candidates. So please do join us if you're interested in making some calls. You'll see Taylor there. You'll get training at the top if you need it. Otherwise, you can join a little bit later and we will plug you right into phone banks. As for example, Joanna just mentioned she lost her race last time, but just a couple hundred votes. Every single phone call we make matters. Every dollar we give matters. This is a battle of inches every single race, and we have to give it all that we've got. The last thing we want is to wake up on the day after the election and feel like maybe we didn't do enough. So let's not let that happen. I know that everybody here isn't going to let that happen. You're here, you're fired up, and we are going to flip the Texas House. So there's another link in there also to join Sister District as a volunteer. We would love to have you. We do this year in, day out, year after year, support state-led races, help to build progressive majorities, as Gabby was mentioning. And we are so psyched for everything we're going to be able to do this year with your help. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to Gabby.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lala. And thank you for the shout outs to your incredible team. Our organizing department has just been on fire this year, and there's a lot of ways to get involved. If folks have not joined us at Sister District yet, now is a great time. We're 55 days out, and there's a lot of work still to be done and plenty to do. So I hope you'll sign up. I see Taylor posted a link to our volunteer form and our upcoming phone bank and all the rest. So with that, I think Beto has joined us, and so it is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Beto O'Rourke. There could be a lot of introductions for Beto. He's, of course, had an incredible career in public service, and also, is, as I understand it, a punk rocker from back in the day. But what I'd love to focus on is his incredible generosity in investing his time and his resources to help state legislative candidates in the Texas State House this year. And, there's so much going on this year. It's a very loud election environment. So many places for us to all put our time and our energy, but he's really recognized the incredible power of state legislatures, particularly in Texas, his home state, and what's at stake this year. We talked earlier about the importance of breaking this recalcitrant Republican trifecta in Texas. It is a redistricting year. There are so many reasons to focus on Texas, and Beto has really done that. So, and of course, Powered by People has, as I understand it, registered 77,000 new folks in Texas to vote in just the last couple of months. And so it's fantastic to have him with us. With that, I'll turn things over to you, Beto, to hear your thoughts about what's at stake in Texas this year and what you're seeing on the ground.
Well, thanks for inviting me to join you. And it's really wonderful to be in your company and the company of Sister District, because our organization here in Texas, Powered by People, has a very similar mission and a very similar approach. And we really strongly believe that, there's probably a time and place for TV ads and, the slick mailers that you get about candidates that you may or may not ever read, the Facebook ads, all that stuff. But that the most powerful thing in a campaign in our democracy is a connection that two Americans, or in our case, two Texans, will make, whether knocking on someone's door or post-COVID calling somebody on their phone or texting them directly. That is something that the recipient of that outreach will never forget. They don't always welcome it, and they're not always grateful when you called, especially if they're eating dinner. But they're going to remember that so much more clearly than they are almost anything else that's involved in our politics today. And you all get that, and you are turning this power of the volunteers that you have raised towards electing extraordinary candidates like the three that you just met here in Texas, who are part of, I think, in my 47 years, the most amazing field of challengers that this state has ever seen. You have folks from every walk of life and life experience, the expertise that they bring to the table, and the courage with which they fight in these campaigns to make sure that people's voices in their districts are heard. And then given the chances that they have, even before they signed up to be on the ballot, I mean, in the three districts represented here today, we won more votes than did Ted Cruz in 2018. And we have shown that not only can you do this, in some ways we have done this. We've helped to turn out enough Democratic voters to win these elections. And by extension, I'm sure, Gaby, you and Lala and others have already made this very clear. These three candidates win their races. Your volunteers do everything that they can to help elect great Democrats to the state legislature. And we win a majority for the first time in 20 years. And it's a majority that not only will pursue progressive goals like expanding Medicaid in a state that is the least insured in the country, or confronting climate change from this energy-rich state before it is too late, or reducing gun violence in a country that loses 100 of our fellow Americans every single day through gun violence. In addition to moving forward on all those important issues, they have the chance to begin to dismantle the infrastructure of voter suppression and voter intimidation that has defined the Democratic small d experience for Black and brown voters in Texas for as long as we have been a state. Post-Reconstruction, you have Jim Crow, segregation. In the 1920s, you have the legal, passed by the state legislature, all-white primary that by law said that if you were Black or brown in the state of Texas, you could not vote. And that was not struck down by the Supreme Court until 1944. Since then, you have what is probably the most racially gerrymandered state in the union. You have the most onerous voter ID laws on the books. And in the midst of this pandemic, our state government is refusing to allow people to vote at a safe distance through mail, forcing them to vote in person, despite the fact that 750 polling locations have been closed in the state of Texas in the last 8 years. And most of them in communities that have fast growing Black and Latino populations. So if you want to change that, and if you want the true genius and diversity of Texas to be revealed in its government, we got to win these races. And the way that you all are pursuing this, and the fact that you've even focused on Texas, a state that so many in the rest of the country wrote off long ago, just makes me so grateful for your work, and so grateful to be a part of today's conversation. I'm so excited to be doing the work that we're doing with Powered by People. Joanna, Lorenzo, Celina, they are the future of this state. They're going to win these races, and they're going to win them because of the work that your volunteers are putting into this. So just wanted to come on and say thank you, and just tell you how grateful we are for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And we're so grateful to you for what you're doing. So one question that's on a lot of folks' minds is what you're seeing on the ground. What kind of energy are you seeing on the ground, and how have candidates adjusted to campaigning during COVID? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're doing a lot of what your volunteers are doing. So I actually joined Joanna and Celina a couple of nights ago, making phone calls into their districts, and they each brought 30 or 40 volunteers. Powered by People probably brought another 200 to 300 volunteers. And we just make phone calls all night. And I'll tell you what's actually gratifying, and it sounds counterintuitive, is when on those phone banks I call somebody and I say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of Celina Montoya. She's running to represent you in the state legislature. And they don't know who Celina Montoya is. And they don't know that there's a state legislative race going on, because as you said, there's a lot going on in our politics and in our country right now, a lot to be distracted by. And frankly, a lot of people in a state who pays the minimum wage of $7.25 are at their second or third job when one of our phone bankers reach them. They haven't had time to talk about it. But the reason that it's so gratifying to me is that phone call from a sister district volunteer, from a Celina Montoya volunteer, from a Powered by People volunteer, has a chance to introduce that voter to the candidate, to the importance of the election, and to make sure that when so much of the oxygen is being taken up by the presidential race, those who go out to vote on October 13th, which is 34 days away, and it's the first day of early voting in Texas, that they go out to vote not just for president, but are looking for those Democrats further down the ticket. One of the lessons we take away from 2018 is, we won these 3 districts, but the Democratic, I did against Ted Cruz, but those 3 Democratic challengers in those districts did not. And so part of the reason I'm so focused this year and Powered by People so focused on these state house races is we need to make sure that we're building that awareness. So that's what I'm seeing is I'm seeing these candidates adapt to the circumstances, make the most of all these great volunteers who are stepping up to make phone calls and outworking and out hustling the Republican incumbents that they're running against, who are often better funded than they are. But I really think the energy and the power, the momentum is with us right now. We just have to see it through all the way to November 3rd.
Absolutely. And certainly campaigning in COVID has brought unprecedented challenges for candidates. We're supporting 40 candidates across the country and are seeing such extraordinary creativity among candidates and resilience in the face of just an completely unexpected campaign run. And I'm curious what you think the biggest challenges are for Texas State House candidates in the next 55 days, and what you're seeing as sort of the last big push and what needs to be done between then and now.
Well, Texas, I was kind of making the case that for the last 144 years has done everything in its power to keep some people in this state from voting. And by some people, I mean Black Texans and Latino Texans and Texans that live in communities of color. And it's why we have one of the worst voter turnout rates in the United States. And in some years, we've been 50th, dead last, not by accident, but by design, not because we don't love democracy, but because we were drawn that way. And so you talk about some obstacles and some challenges over the next 34 days till early voting, 55 days till election day. overcoming the suppression and intimidation. The fact that this state is forcing people, as they've closed 750 polling locations, to go vote in person. If you saw pictures from our primary in Texas in March, there were lines at Texas Southern University, one of our great historically Black colleges, that went 6 hours deep in the midst of a pandemic, where we know there is a safe, legal alternative that is fairly immune from fraud, which is voting by mail. So they will pull out all the stops to try to keep people from voting. It is so incumbent upon us that we help people find a safe way to vote if they are eligible for a ballot by mail. They're over 65 years, or they have some physical condition that prevents them from voting. You know, these candidates, our campaigns, our efforts, our volunteers have to make sure that we connect those voters with a safe means of voting at a distance. It means that we have to really focus on the integrity of our elections and the protection of voters. And there's a number of groups working on that right now, but we also have to, do the math as Andrew Yang would admonish us to do. We've got to add net new voters to the rolls. And you may know this, but over the last 4 years, 2 million new Texas voters have been added to the rolls, which is freaking crazy. And that's in addition to those voters that we're adding on a daily basis through our efforts, through the Texas Democratic Party's efforts, who's doing an amazing job right now. So I think these candidates, our campaigns, all of us who are invested in this effort, we just have to do everything we can to register more people, turn out more people, and protect those people when in some cases they take their lives in their hands by going out to the polls. The most important election against some of the most challenging circumstances. I mean, this is what we were made for. And this is when you want to be alive and when you want to be living in this democracy. This is our moment of truth. And if we screw this up, we lose it forever. I mean, it's not like, well, let's go get them next time. Could very well be gone. And here, last thing I want to tell you on this, and I think you know this, and I think this is probably why you all are interested in Texas beyond the phenomenal candidates you're supporting. In addition to winning the state House majority, if we expand the electorate sufficiently, if we have the greatest turnout in a presidential election cycle Texas has ever seen, and we can do that, then not only do we get that majority, not only do we elect more Democrats to Congress, maybe give MJ Hagar a chance to defeat John Cornyn for the U.S. Senate, but Joe Biden could very well be the first Democratic nominee in 44 years to win the electoral college votes of Texas, 38 electoral college votes. And if you, like I, am concerned that Donald Trump's going to try to steal this election and that he will be the perpetrator of fraud, then the answer to that is Texas. If we win Texas, holy shit, game is over for Trump and Trumpism in America. We turn the page and we start the next necessary chapter for this country. Only Texas can deliver that. And interestingly, these state house candidates, instead of being the beneficiaries of coattails from the top of the ticket, they're going to be sending voters up the ticket to Joe Biden. So this could really be a beautiful night on the 3rd of November.
1,000%. A thousand yeses to each of those pieces. A lot of folks ask me what the challenges are for candidates, and I sort of think of them in 3 buckets. There's cutting through the noise and reaching voters, which is harder this year since we're not at the doors. There's fundraising, which is harder this year because it's a global economic crisis in many respects. And then the third is voter education, which you touched on. Even before you can convince someone to go out and vote for you, you have to be able to tell them how to vote. And the rules have been changing. We've had primary dates change in various parts of the country. All different, the rules of the game are changing midstream. And certainly Mark Elias is doing God's work in filing litigation all over the place. But it does create a voter education challenge. And so it's great to hear that, the Texas Democratic Party and other organizations are filling in to, make sure that folks know how to vote and vote safely, given those changes that are happening on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, those, for me, there are a few things as hard as phone banking in politics. Like, I never try to give anyone the illusion that this is going to be fun and then you're going to have a great time phone banking. I mean, I think you'll be fulfilled and you'll have a sense of purpose, and you'll have that function that you want to have at this critical moment in our country's history. But it can really suck. I mean, the number of wrong numbers, the hangups, the go F yourself or jump in a lake that you get from people. But all of that is more than made up for by two things. One, even the Trump voters and the wrong numbers are important phone calls, because we weed those numbers out of the list that our Democratic candidates will have to call when they're turning out voters. They won't waste their time on bad numbers. The second thing, and it's the transcendent thing about the work that we're all doing, is when you do connect with the voter and you've reached that person working at 7-Eleven and it's their second job, they haven't had time to think about the election, and you say, hey, I want to tell you about this guy, Lorenzo Sanchez, who's running to represent you in the state house. And you know that because of that phone call, that guy's going to remember Lorenzo's name when he does go to vote, maybe motivated against Trump or for Biden or for whatever reason. He won't stop voting until he gets to Lorenzo's name on the ballot. That's how Lorenzo's going to win. And then you also sometimes make these really beautiful connections with people. I talked to a woman in Texas on a phone bank that I was calling for named Kelly, and she told me she wasn't going to vote. And she said, as a Black woman, am I, outraged by Donald Trump? Absolutely. But I have some really deep concerns about Joe Biden, and I've got concerns about his voting history, and I have concerns about whether he's the right nominee. And we had this very thoughtful conversation. I didn't pressure her. I didn't, push her. I just said, hey, I totally understand where you are, and I wish you luck in making this decision. That's kind of the way we left it. But I also left her my cell phone number, and I said, call me if you want to continue the conversation. And a few days later, she calls me and she said, I've been thinking about what we were talking about, and I think I'm going to vote, but I don't know how to vote by mail, and I don't even know if I qualify. Can you help me? And we put her in touch with the elections department in her county, and now Kelly is, I hope, going to vote. And it wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have called her. And that's happening hundreds of thousands, millions of times over in these phone calls we're making. That's the antidote to despair, or the temptation to despair in the face of so much crazy shit that's going on right now in our country. And it's also the key to victory. There's no other way to win. There's not enough money. There isn't a magic message. There's no cavalry or silver bullet. It is the hard, tough, grinding work of reaching out to these voters. So again, kudos to you all for doing this.
1,000%. And you mentioned earlier that, or alluded to the fact that working to flip these seats in the Texas State House will have cascading effects all the way up and reverberate all the way up the ticket. And, a little earlier, we talked about the political strategy for a national organization to be focusing on Texas. And there really is a nested opportunity here. Working to flip these State House seats will help, there's a competitive Senate race. There are competitive congressional races, and Texas is a presidential battleground. We were just talking about the fact that on 538, the average poll for Texas over the past several weeks has Biden and Trump within half a point. And so, this is absolutely a presidential battleground. And so building this momentum and turning out voters at the bottom of the ticket is going to carry all the way up. And another reason we talked about why we should all care about Texas, even if we're in California or DC, is redistricting and the critical importance of this being our last chance to change the composition of the state legislature in Texas for the next 10 years. And so I'd be so curious for your perspective about how you've seen gerrymandering hurt Texans and what we're fighting for this year in giving Democrats a seat at the table by flipping the House in this redistricting process.
Yeah, there's a particularly pernicious element to the gerrymandering that has taken place in Texas, and it centers on race and the effort to diminish the impact and even the likelihood that Black voters will have, or that they will vote, and the functional drawing people out of their own democracy, and doing so through the most elaborately designed districts that, if you all know your Texas geography, Mike Siegel, who's a Democrat running for the United States Congress, is running against Mike McCall, an entrenched Republican incumbent. And that district stretches from Austin, Texas to Houston, Texas. And those are two very different parts of the state, in a very large state, and two totally different communities, and in no way meets the letter or the spirit of the law when it comes to single member districts in this country. But what it does do is it entrenches, you know, that incumbent. And it does so at the expense not only of Democrats, but specifically of Black and brown voters and voters in communities of color. And it's not me saying this. 2017, a federal judge, you know, defined this as racial gerrymandering and ordered Texas to cure what it had done that was contrary to the Constitution. But this shit will continue to happen and has always happened in Texas unless we change the dynamic of power and those who hold positions of public trust. And so, you know, when you look at the field of state house candidates who are running right now, I mean, really look at who's running. So often you will find women running, so often Black women, women of color. So often, as in Lorenzo's case, you'll find Latinos who are severely underrepresented in our government and in positions of power and in public trust. And then to have those same people win those races and literally have a seat at the table in 2021, when we get 3 new congressional districts and we redraw the boundaries for the existing 36 congressional districts in Texas, and then all the state house and state senate districts underneath them, you know, talk about cascading effects. And you're absolutely right. This is not just important for the 2022 election. It is important for the next decade plus. And so 2 ways of looking at it. If we miss the boat on this, we not Democrats, we people are locked out of power for 10 years. If we win this, we begin to draw people back into their government, back into their democracy. And all of the ills that follow racial gerrymandering and voter suppression and voter intimidation, including the very significant, severe criminal justice problem that we have in Texas, the lack of access to healthcare, the fact that the #1 provider of mental health care in our state is the county jail system, and the largest inpatient provider of mental health care services is the Harris County Jail. You know, all of that is a function of locking people out of our democracy and giving them a chance to guide the course in the direction that our state and by extension, our country will take. So, I mean, not to put any more pressure on Joanna and Celina and Lorenzo and the others who are running and sister district, but we've got to fucking win this election, and we've got to win all these races, and we've got to win them because the people of the future are counting on us. It's not just this generation and those of us who are working on this today. It is people a decade plus from now who will be looking back on 2020 and wanting to know that we did the right thing and won this while we still could. So again, no pressure, but let's go out and win this.
Yeah. And thank you for tying redistricting and gerrymandering to the important issue of racial justice. And Carol Anderson, Professor Carol Anderson, has written so eloquently about how racist the practice of gerrymandering is, both racial gerrymandering, which wears its racist intent on its sleeve, but also partisan gerrymandering. When the in-party is mostly white, it means that the map-making process privileges white voices and interests. I was just speaking recently to one of our alums who's a sitting legislator in the Washington Senate, who told me that there are no Black members of the Washington State Senate, not a single one. And so, you know, the composition, so who is in your legislative body and whose interests are at the top of their mind goes into the map-making process. And so there is this way in which gerrymandering is a racist practice in both of its flavors. And so to root that out requires that we elect folks like Joanna and Celina and Lorenzo to the Texas to the Texas House this year. So, you know, and that brings us to another point, and this will be our last question. How important is the rising American electorate to victory in Texas this year? People of color, young people, how important are these folks in getting a victory all the way from the bottom to the top of the ticket?
Absolutely critical, and not foreordained that that they will vote, or that they will vote the way that many present company excluded, assume that they will. And that's brought home to me every time I do a phone bank. And I just did one last night. We made over 320,000 phone calls in Texas, and I was on for 2.5 hours and, you know, got my share of hangups and Trump voters, but I also talked to a surprising number of undecided voters. And, you know, I mentioned Kelly, a Black woman who told me she wasn't going to vote and who later told me that she would. She's trying to find out how to vote by mail. But last night I spoke to a number of Latinos and Latinas in Texas who are undecided and are not sure that they're going to vote in this election. And so the way I look at it, if the great sin committed by the Republican Party, at least in the modern era, is the functional disenfranchisement of our fellow Americans and the racial gerrymander that's taking place and the racial voter ID laws and the racial polling place closures and the racial you have to vote in person in the midst of COVID, even though you have no immunity against this deadly virus, then the great sin on the part of Democrats is taking these same voters who've been marginalized and excluded by the parties in power, taking them for granted and assuming that if you're Black, if you're Latino, if you live in a community of color, that you're going to vote for Democrats. And we, present company, cannot make that same mistake ever and understand that everyone should be afforded the respect and dignity of reaching out to them and asking them and talking to them and listening to them and making sure that that's reflected or shared back to the candidates and campaigns, and that is then reflected in their message and the way that they reach out and turn out these voters. And again, I know that you all get this or you wouldn't be doing the work that you are doing. But I really think that sometimes our national party or those who influence our national party and the whole cartel of consultants could learn a lesson or two from what we're doing in Texas, what you all are doing with Sister District. So yes, it's critical to answer your question, but let's not assume that it will roll of its own accord. And let's really make the intentional, concerted effort to reach out to especially those who have been drawn out or written off or taken for granted by both parties, right? And so it just underscores how important the work is that we are all doing, and is why I'm on this call, because I'm so grateful to you. And I recognize that really more than just about anything else we could be doing, calling, texting, connecting with voters directly is the single greatest opportunity to win a majority of the state house in Texas. And again, I think make Biden the first Democrat to win the state of Texas. So you all are doing it, and I'm so grateful to you and so grateful to these candidates that you are showcasing today. They're my heroes, and we want to see them win after having put themselves out there and running such strong races.
Beto, thank you so much. Everyone, you know, what a pleasure to have Beto with us. I just heard that we're at $4,600 raised at this event. We had a $5,000 goal, so we're $400 away. Please consider digging into your pockets again and donating again, or donating for the first time if you haven't. And you know, we're doing everything we can in the next 55 days, and I know, Beto, you are doing everything you can to bring home this win, to flip the Texas State House, to flip some congressional seats, to, you know, and to deliver Texas to Joe Biden, which is absolutely a possibility. And so this election will matter for the next 10 years. What we do in the next 55 days will really chart the course for really the next decade. So I want to thank everyone for being with us. Beto, I want to thank you so much for taking your time and your generosity with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And folks, I just want to echo what Gaby said. If you can donate $10, $50, $100, whatever your capacity is, let me just vouch for how that money is going to be used. It is going to be spent to ensure that Americans are calling Americans, voters are calling voters, people are talking to people, which in this very divided, polarized moment is just so critically important to get past all the noise and make sure that we connect with those who are going to decide the outcomes of the most important elections of our lifetime. So please pitch in, please help them out. And then again, know that we are grateful here in Texas for what you're doing. And you've got some of our top callers who are on here. I think Christy from Powered by People, TM, and some other of our great volunteers are on as well. They're big supporters of yours. So please keep it up. We're grateful.
Thank you so much, Beto. And thank you to Celina, Joanna, and Lorenzo for being with us. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and I hope everyone has a lovely evening. Thanks so much.
Adios. Bye-bye.